Hi, I'm Christy Naus from the Community Foundation. Welcome to this edition of Connections. I'm here today with my friend Scott Racker, the Executive Director of the Robert D. and Billie Ray Center at Drake University. Scott, thanks so much for joining me again.
Thank you.
We bring your perspective to those that are watching Connections because it's so important now more than ever. We were just talking about the connections that we offered during caucus time and how much has changed since then. Our community is dealing with the pandemic, obviously, the social justice and racial equity issues, and now heading into election time. And I'm sure that you're busier than ever helping us have resources to have civil conversations and really lead in ways that are promoting civility in our community. Tell us more about your work and how to navigate this time.
Well, thank you, Christy, and I want to thank not only you, but the leadership at the foundation for all that you do for our community and these opportunities to visit with you and our community members about the work that we're doing to try and transform lives and strengthen communities right here in Central Iowa and, in fact, with our work globally. It really is rooted, Christy, as you know, in Governor Ray's vision, that if we got our character competencies right and our ethical leadership in action individually, that one of the outcomes of that would be an enhanced level of civility. So when we look at things that we identify as, well, that's not civil, in any of those areas you just identified, people are actually thinking about something that somebody either lacked in their leadership or in their character delivery of what they gave. So I agree firmly with what Governor Ray talked about, that if we get our character competencies in order and we demonstrate ethical leadership, that civility is one of those outcomes. But what's also really important to understand about that, there are components of civility that deal with nice and being mannerly. But when we're talking about civility, it's really the element of how do we have the conversations, the difficult conversations? How do we disagree without being disagreeable? A civil dialogue and discourse doesn't mean that we come to the same point and believe the same thing. It's how do we have the conversations about the difficult topics that we may disagree on to find a better understanding, to live more civilly and find the best option and result for who we are and how we can move together as a society and a community.
I think now more than ever too, just anxiety and stressors are so high that taking the pause to listen is one of the first things to go. And what I've learned from you over time is that, listening with respect is such a key to some of this. What are some other tools?
I think one of the things that I look at is we can't talk about tools without talking about the 6 pillars of character as a starting point. And it's interesting because I view the 6 pillars of character as tools, as strategies to be effective in how I conduct myself. So when you think of the 6 pillars of character as a tool, I would encourage people to think of them as I and action orientation. Okay. What can I, Scott Racker, do today to act in a capacity worthy of trust? What can I do to treat people with respect, regardless of how they may have treated me, whether I agree or disagree with them? How can I be responsible and accountable for the choices I make and the consequences that come from those choices, both good and bad? What can I do to be fair in my decision making, that the person that might be impacted by a decision would see that as being equitable, where people get what they do and they deserve? Can I demonstrate a caring heart? And right now, I think we can all demonstrate a little bit more caring hearts. We all need a little grace right now, as an example.
Yep.
And what does it look like to be a good citizen? Right? And we see great opportunities with that, from voicing our opinions to voting. But in doing all of those, when you look at respect and caring, what does that look like in effective communication? Well, I want to seek to understand as well as be understood. So I might enter a conversation with you first, that the mindset of this conversation is, I want to understand your opinion on this and why you believe the way you do, rather than trying to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong.
Exactly.
And so I think one of the listening skills is this active listening. And one of the challenges with that is to seek others' input, seek to understand. You don't acquiesce the being understood part. But the active listening means I'm going to listen through what you say. And this is a challenge for me. I will acknowledge this, people that know me well. I tend to listen, and when you present and facilitate a lot, you listen for a response. So if you're speaking 3 paragraphs to me, you're 3 sentences into the first paragraph, and my brain is already what my response is. And I'm missing what you're saying in the second and the third paragraph. One of the strategies to listen through people is to listen through the end and use one significant word from their last sentence in your first sentence. It trains your brain to listen all the way through. And then there might be a pause as you reflect on what you want to respond and say. Listening is critical, especially with the conversations we need to be having right now.
Yeah, those are great tips. And, I almost think that they're used on a daily basis at this point. And when you see a conversation elevating, whether you're engaged in it or you're a listener, you're an observer, what are some de-escalation sorts of tips that you might have as we're having those more contentious conversations?
Right. Well, a couple of things that we use is look at language, and especially if you're involved in the conversation. Try and stress I language. I think, I believe, I feel, and avoid the you statements, the Dart statement.
Yes.
Christy, you always do this. You're wrong. Yeah. You don't know the facts, right? So that's one thing. Verify, clarify statements are good as well. Did I understand you to say, and then so repeating what people say. But I think really the most significant in de-escalating comes before the conversation. And we've talked about this before. The critical essence of building relationship with people. To understand people and what are our common theories? Exactly. What are our common beliefs?
Where's the common ground that we both know we come from or want to get to?
Well, even this conversation we had before we started the taping, you and I both talked about our young adult children. You and I have a common link and a common bond around that, outside any other issues, and we've formed a friendship around that, which has allowed us then, if we wanted to go into a deeper dive on other conversations without trying to say, I'm right, you're wrong, but to seek to understand. So I think that's one of the de-escalations. The other thing that I think, and you brought this up, and I want to make sure we address this because I think it's critical right now. I think people are at heightened levels of stress and anxiety in our society. That makes it more difficult to do the things that we're talking about. And again, as you said, it's not just the pandemic, it's the related financial uncertainties that come with the pandemic. It's changing worlds. You think if you're a parent of a school-aged youth right now and the challenges you're facing today that you weren't facing a year ago, depending on the model of leadership that they've brought within the schools. And then you put on the social justice and racial equity issues that as a society we are and must be dealing with, and what can we do proactively in our community to understand those. And then yes, the polarization around political issues that's heightened by the campaign, but will still be here the day after the election. Right. So all of those things have created a heightened anxiety. People are anxious. People are under stress. And kind of, you've heard the phrase, put yourself in their shoes. I don't know what you've walked in here today with, except that I do know that you took a son to school. That's an emotional time for someone. That heightens the anxiety. So if you can start to think about where are others coming from rather than just where am I coming from, it starts to de-escalate it. So that concept really is also in these times, I think, a little bit of empathy, right? It's like, I'm really not sure where you're coming to this, but I don't realize that I might be working with someone in our work that is dealing, and we had a phone call with a person I'm working with in California, and we've had to reschedule 3 times because she has a kindergartner and they didn't know when their online was going. And we actually had the conversation, how do I do my job while I'm still trying to do this? People are stressed. We have anxiety. And again, the character competencies are those things like grace and caring and empathy. And if we could demonstrate some of those, and I think stepping back from thinking that we're always right. That's a challenge for me,
very good point. I first met you when my daughter, I believe, was in kindergarten. She is now 25 years old. And I was seeking resources so that I could parent to teach character. And I kept those resources around home to help guide my parenting. Where can people get to some of the tools and resources that you all provide, both for our community, our world, right? You're a global, really, organization. How can we get those in the hands of people who want to know more?
Well, thank you for asking that. And people can go to our website at drake.edu/Ray Center, or just Google the Robert D. and Billie Ray Center, or even quicker, Google Character Counts. We are now the global provider to Character Counts. We started here in Iowa, and then last year acquired the global rights. We serve over 8 million youth nationally and internationally in our footprint. And one of the things we've done in our pandemic pivoting is really drive into online resources. We just released a brand new resource for parents, educators, and students called Return to Learn.
Yes.
And it takes the 6 pillars of character with specific grounded theory, research, strategies, and how you deliver that. So things that parents are dealing with at home right now with their students of how attitude and effort can lead to improvement are not just the goal setting process, but what's the goal achievement process and what steps do I need to take to get there? What will it take for me to do my best work and treat each other with care and respect as I'm a student at home with a parent or online? There's resources and strategies that are online. You can get them through our website. We're also pleased that the Iowa Department of Education is putting out those as part of their free resources, as well as several others across the country.
Very good. Scott, thank you so much for what you lead here and all of the great work that you do to really help us lead with civility and live with character. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow the Community Foundation on our social channels where you'll see more episodes of Connections.